Okay, I'll let you sit down and we're good to go. Okay, good afternoon. It's nice to say I was a little bit hesitant when I saw people drifting away. And I was like tempted to throw you all back in, but you've all come back. Thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. I have been here before, a few years back. I came to do a lecture on Wallace's spider. Does anyone recall that? Were they here? I'm sure some of you will. Because myself and Angela, my wife here today, we are in fact entomologists. And we are also arachnologists. That being, of course, someone who studies the dreaded S word, spiders. But don't panic, we're not in this. So, why am I here? What are my credentials? Well, basically, I've been fascinated with Wallace for as long as I can remember. When I was 13 years of age, a maiden aunt gave me a book for Christmas. And she pushed this book into my hand and she said, you have to read this book because one day you will have to make a choice. And at that stage, I've got to be honest, I was 13 years of age. I'd just met the girl next door, my wife Angela, who I've been married to for 42 years. And I had no interest in reading a book written by a man with a dodgy beard. And that book was in fact The Origin of Species. And I'm going to be honest, the book went on the shelf and there it stayed. And every time my aunt came over and she asked me the same question, have you read the book? And of course I'm 13, 14 and I went, yes! And she looked at me with a wry smile and just shook her head. Knowing full well I was lying through my teeth. As years went by and I found myself in a biology lesson in later life, I heard this book mentioned and I thought, I really should give that a go. I went home, sat down, picked it up and read it. And I had absolutely no idea what it was about. It completely foxed me. But something stuck in my memory, and after that I read it and read it and read it, and I've probably read it 30 times now. I even take it on holiday with me, The Origin of Species. And it's a thick book, to be fair, so it's a bit of a heavy carriage. I don't use Kindles and things like that, I use books. And so literally, but in that book, of course, Darwin mentions right at the very beginning in the foreword, he mentions Wallace. Now, Darwin could have mentioned so many other people, because there was a lot of people he took his inspiration from. But why, this is pre-internet days, of course, so I said, why would he mention this man who no one's ever heard of, Alfred Russel Wallace? He could have mentioned lots of people, but he didn't. Darwin admits himself, without Wallace's input, he probably would never have published Origin of Species. So I'm at that stage, there's no internet in the sort of, I suppose, 80s, early 80s. There's no internet, and I thought I better go down the library. And I literally researched Wallace to the nth degree. I read every book I could find on him, I read every book he had written. I studied him, and I became fascinated to him. All I had to do was convince my wife that we needed to go to Indonesia to follow in his footsteps. It wasn't that difficult. My wife's a naturalist like I am, and she wanted to go anyway. And this is true. We sat in our lounge, we just got married, and we literally were deciding whether to follow Darwin to South America or follow Wallace to Southeast Asia. And we literally tossed a coin. And we said, okay, heads, we go to South America, tails, we go to Southeast Asia. Up it went, tails, thank God. And we went to Southeast Asia, and really, I think we were both glad because we both fell in love with orangutan. And we've been working with orangutan ever since. So, today I want to take you on a journey in the footsteps of Alfred Russel Wallace in search of the birds of paradise. Now, if you know anything about Wallace, you will know that he was one of the first Europeans to ever see birds of paradise alive. They've been seen dead, but they've never been seen alive. So let's take you on a journey. So, in 2020, literally just before the pandemic hit, we had found ourselves, first of all, we'd been on a big ship, working on a big ship. I lecture on cruise ships. And we were working on a big ship, and everybody on the ship was ill. This is 2019, late 2019. And we suddenly realised that most people on the ship were ill. And of course, at that time, no one knew it was COVID. It was just something. And we got back to England. 3 weeks later, we found ourselves on another ship going out to Indonesia. Again, when the week we got back, 2 days later, they closed the world. So we were very lucky. A friend of ours got stuck in Kuala Lumpur for 6 months. Couldn't get back. But we were very lucky. So in 2020, we were invited by a company called SeaTrek, who are a tourist company. They run eco trips, but they also do a lot of work out there with coral restoration, that type of thing. So we thought it was a good thing to get involved with. So the expedition was really to take out a number of scientists, academics, ornithologists, entomologists, and eco-tourists as well, to be fair, because that was the paying arm of the company. So the aims of the expedition were simple. We wanted to follow in the footsteps of naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace in Indonesia in his search for the birds of paradise. We wanted to visit the sites first described by Wallace in his book, The Malay Archipelago, which I hope some of you have read. And if you haven't read it, go and buy it immediately and read it, because you will absolutely love it. It's a wonderfully written book, very easy to read, unlike The Origin of Species, which is a very difficult book to read. So we wanted to ascertain if the species of flora and fauna that he had discovered and described in his book were there and still at his recorded locations. For me, the pinnacle of the trip would be to visit the remote Bacan Island and find a population of Wallace's golden birdwing butterfly. One place on Earth, Bacan Island. So we wanted to see if we could find that. But we also wanted to work with SeaTrek, who help coral conservation and the welfare and education of indigenous people. Because people forget, when COVID hit the world, yes, it affected us, but it affected these guys. And most of these guys who live on these islands in Indonesia, no electric, no medicine, and they all got COVID. Right? COVID hit them as bad as it hit us. And there was a lot of problems, and of course no tourists, no income. So we have to balance it. So these were the aims of the trip. So we all know this fella. This is a very famous painting, which actually hangs in the boardroom at Down House. Now, Down House, of course, is Darwin's residence. And I have been very, very fortunate to stand in front of the original painting and to see this. I've lectured at Down House, and again, ironically, I lectured for the Linnean Society on a lecture on Wallace. The irony was not lost on them, to be fair, when I was talking about Wallace. But this is a very famous painting, painted after Wallace's death, but interestingly you can see here, at the bottom, 2 kingbirds of paradise. And note also in the background the hut, which we'll come back to, I'll show you that in a moment, but this is the hut, or the type of hut that Wallace would have lived in. This was painted, to be fair, from a photograph of Wallace, and it's a very famous photograph, it appears in most books, but this was painted from that photograph. So this is Alfred Russel Wallace, 1823 to 1913, 90 years old when he died. He was the last of the great Victorian scientists, the last one. He was a very private man in his later years. In his later years he didn't really get involved in natural history, he was more into socialism, humanitarianism. But 90 years of age, he really was the last of the Victorian scientists. One of the things that attracted me to his work was this. Should man ever reach these distant shores, he will so disturb the delicate balance they will disappear forever. And he said this in 1869. Now here's a man sitting out in the tropics, and he's looking around him, and he's seeing trees, and he's seeing animals, and he's thinking, yeah, one day all this will be gone, because we will arrive en masse. And he was right. We've been travelling to Borneo since around 1998, and in that time we have seen probably 40% rainforest destruction in that time. So you fly over Borneo now, you don't see forest. So he was right, and that was really what, it really wasn't really his idea of evolution that fascinated me, it was this. such a man with foresight. I could not believe this guy could exist. So birds of paradise. Well, we widely accept that Wallace was one of the first Europeans to actually see live birds. But it was really Magellan, the great explorer who sailed around the world, who in the sort of 16th century, early 16th century, he literally travelled all around the Indonesian archipelago. And when he arrived on certain islands, he was given gifts by the locals, the indigenous people. And one of the gifts they gave him were birds of paradise, dead birds of paradise. Now, birds of paradise, as you know, you'll see, they're all with pretty feathers and things. So, why birds of paradise? Why would we call them birds of paradise? Well, the truth is this. When he was given to these birds, these dead, stuffed birds, in order for them to be preserved so they didn't decay, they were stuffed, they were skinned and then literally stuffed with salt. But in order to make sure they didn't decay further, they cut their legs off, their feet, because the feet of a bird decay. So all these birds had their feet removed before they were sent back to Europe. When they arrived on the European academic's desk, they got no feet. And this is 1521 or 1500. So the scientists went, these birds have no feet. If they have no feet, how do they land? And if they can't land, that means they must be birds of God. They are miracles because they must always be in flight, hence birds of paradise. And the name stuck. Of course, we now know they do have feet. But what is nice is one of the birds is actually called Paradisiae apoda, which means bird with no feet. So it's heavenly birds. So currently, there are 42 species of birds of paradise. There are 27 species of bowerbirds. In fairness, there's not a great deal of difference. Birds of paradise tend to nest in trees, high up, and bowerbirds tend to nest on the ground. And you've all seen the documentaries of these conical nests. They're bowerbirds. There's not a great deal of difference. They all sort of from the same area, and they're all beautifully feathered birds. But we currently 42 birds of paradise, 27 bowerbirds. Just a few. I took this from an old book, really. You can see just some of them. King birds of paradise. And the truth is, most of them live in Papua New Guinea. Now, the problem with Papua New Guinea is it's unsafe to travel. When I say unsafe, it's you're not going to get attacked by cannibals and headhunters. You're more likely to get attacked by pirates and muggers, because Papua New Guinea can be a bit lawless. Papua, which is the west side of Papua New Guinea, West Papua, is very, very safe. We've been there. But Papua New Guinea, you do have to be careful. So most of these birds exist in Papua New Guinea. So you do have to think before you go. Some of them do appear in Indonesia and in West Papua, and those were the birds we were interested in. So the Indonesian archipelago. If you look, the green is Indonesia. I'll come over this side actually, because this is not picking up. Let's go back. So this is what we used to call Irian Jaya. This is Papua New Guinea. This is West Papua, Borneo, Sulawesi, Ternate, Sumatra, Java. So that's really, and the area we're going to is this is West Papua. We are going to this area here, which is Raja Ampat. Sun's too bright over there for me. So the Indonesian archipelago, which is really, although Wallace wrote about the Malay archipelago, strictly speaking, of course, it's now called the Indonesian archipelago. Politics and war. So it's now called the Indonesian archipelago. And Wallace travelled all around this area. Now we all know that Wallace had already been to the Amazon and had returned and lost most of his collection. But then he travelled to Indonesia. Now if you read the Malay archipelago, it is not written in chronological order, because Wallace crisscrossed this area, backwards, forwards, you name it, it was just random really. But when he wrote his book, he actually puts it into an order where 1 minute is in Ternate, the next minute is in Papua. So he's not written in chronological order, but he did that for clarity. So, the population of the Indonesian archipelago is 17,500 islands, of which around 6,000 are inhabited. The population is 238 million, most of them centred around Java or Jakarta. If you've ever been to Jakarta, you'll know. It's a hell of a city. It's the second most diverse area on the planet after the Amazon rainforest, and that's purely because the Amazon is bigger. So the Indonesian archipelago is the second most diverse area on the planet. The seas around the archipelago are stunning. The coral is fantastic. It is under threat at the moment. All coral is under threat, but you can see. So this is where we're going, Raja Ampat. Wallace had set sail from the far end, which was Papua. He then travelled all around the archipelago, backwards and forwards. In that area, there are over 500 languages spoken. Mainly, and what's amazing is if I speak some Indonesian, but I have no idea what they're talking about. But you get two Indonesians from different islands, they speak different languages, but they understand each other. There are some languages which are spoken by no more than 5 people on different islands. It really is fascinating. So, we've all heard of the Wallace line. Have we all heard? I hope we all heard of the Wallace line. Well, the Wallace line is an arbitrary line drawn on a map by Wallace because one day he was sitting there and something puzzled him. And he couldn't understand for the life of him why the animals on this side, the western side of that red line, are so different to the animals on the eastern side of that line. Because to be fair, that little, right at the bottom is Bali and Lombok. It's probably no more than 30 miles distance apart. But the animals on Bali, if you've been to Bali, are so different to the animals on Lombok. In fact, the habitat, Bali used to be lush rainforest. Lombok is scrubland. It's mainly desert. So he couldn't understand, and he puzzled him, and he pondered and pondered. And he couldn't understand, as I say, why on this side of the line we have primates, including us. We have lots of primates. We have hoofed animals. We have binturongs. We have, and if we come further this way, we have tigers. In Sumatra we have tigers. If we come even further west, lions, elephants. But when we go that way, these animals don't exist. We don't have primates that side of the line, except for one species, the Sulawesi macaque, which I'll come on to. But what we do have in Australasia are marsupials, koala bears, wombats, kangaroos. But they don't exist on this side of the line. And the question is why? But what makes it even worse, and he really couldn't understand at first, was on this side of the line, the birds are different on that side of the line. On this side, hornbills, passerine birds. That side, kookaburras, birds of paradise. And you think, well, hang on, birds can fly. So why doesn't a bird fly from Lombok to Bali? It's not that bad. You could fly that, easily fly that. But the reality is this. If you are an animal and you have everything you need, food, good habitat, access to mates, sexual partners, why move? You adapt to your surroundings, which is the basis of natural selection, adaptation. And what Wallace had hit upon, and he didn't realise at the time, was this is natural selection, evolution by natural selection. Because he put forward the theory that these two land masses had never been joined. In other words, animals couldn't transmigrate from one side to the other. So individual populations of different animals grew up differently on different parts of the sides of the line. And he was spot on. And he put forward the idea that these lands had never been joined, and he was right. He had no way of knowing he was right. But now with radar, sonar, we know that the sea between Borneo and Sulawesi is one of the deepest seas on Earth. And if you go out, you can actually look at the dark blue. If you go out about 40 or 50 miles from the coast of Borneo, the seabed goes straight down. and the tectonic plates of the earth have slid over each other. He was spot on. These parts of the world have never been joined together. Therefore, animals evolved separately. Now that's a hell of a piece of deduction for anybody. And again, that's one of the reasons I was struck by this man. This is Roger Ampat. These are all karst limestone outcrops. Some of you may have seen the news recently in Florida, huge volcanoes erupted, causing lots of problems. Hopefully it's stopped because we're going there in a fortnight. I hope it's stopped. So this is really the trip we were doing. We were starting in Papua. Wallace had been to Papua, into a place called Sarong. We would then go over to an island called Bezria, up to Wagio, across to another island, Friwan, down, and this is basically the route this ship would take. Now bear in mind that our ship, although it was a small ship with sails, did have a motor, did have an engine, and it could move at a speed. Wallace's ships used sail power, wind power. So you can see this is 900 kilometres for us over a period of about 10 to 15 days. It would have taken Wallace months to do this trip. And we were sailing on a very comfortable ship with a very comfortable bed, whereas he was sailing on what we call a peninsula ship, and I'll show you one in a moment, with just him and a very small crew. So it must have been terrifying. And if you read the Malay Archipelago, he'll tell you stories of some of his encounters with storms. So this is the trip we were doing. We wanted to end up in Ternate, and I'll come back to Ternate because that's a very important place. So the birds that we knew were in Papua, or in this area, are Wilson's bird of paradise, the red bird of paradise, the king bird of paradise, and the lesser bird of paradise. So these are the 4 birds that we know Wallace had talked about in his book on his travels. And we wanted to know where they're still there. Well, Wallace's book does read like a travel log, and you can follow it word by word and place by place. So the first thing we needed to do was look for Wilson's bird of paradise. We also wanted to visit Sulawesi to find the population of Sulawesi macaque. Now, anyone will say, well, hang on, they're on the wrong side of the Wallace line, that's his theory out the window. The truth is, we think, we're not sure, that most of the Sulawesi macaques were introduced by sailors, Portuguese sailors, who kept them as pets. So they may well have been introduced, and over time they've managed to colonise Sulawesi and certain areas. But they are few and far between. We also wanted to find this bird of paradise, which is my favourite, not the prettiest. That's Wallace's bird of paradise, named after Wallace himself. And we wanted to find that bird. We were hopeful. We also wanted to, I'm a keen snorkeler, as is my wife, and we wanted to look at the coral and work out the state of the coral. And we also wanted to find that, the golden birdwing. So that was the aims, and that's what we were hoping to find. That's the ship. Now, it's not one of your big cruise liners, it's not a massive ocean-going ship, although it does go on oceans. Most of these guys are, some of them are ornithologists, insects, entomologists, things like this. Some of them are just there for the swimming and the snorkeling. But that's the ship, and it's I have to say it's a very comfortable ship. But it's not all plain sailing, as they would say, because when you do get onto land, as one lady said to me, are the birds of paradise easy to find? Well, no, because you hit land, you get off the ship about 3 a.m. in the morning, you on a Zodiac, you then hit the land, you pick up a 4-wheel drive, you drive for an hour and a half along dirt roads in the pitch dark, it starts to get light, they drop you off, and then you walk through the forest for an hour, usually in total darkness, and you have to be quiet, because people, you make a noise, the birds fly away. So you have to be quiet. And there's Angela, as always, leading from the front. Angela's nickname has always been Tarantula, ever since we were kids. And when she went to work at the zoo, day one they called her Tarantula. And that stuck. And I was shocked when I first heard her call her that, but it stuck. So you arrive at the point you need to be as it's getting light, because birds of paradise don't make it easy for you. They only display in the very morning light, just as it's getting light. So you have to be there waiting, and you sit there for a good hour in more or less semi-light, and you shh, nobody make a noise, and then hopefully they arrive. But of course, Indonesia does have a problem, and this is palm oil plantation. This is all over the tropics, and this is what is replacing rainforest. Now, this is used by Western corporations, and sadly, we've seen so much of this planting, and it's all privately owned. So you're not allowed to trespass on here, because there are signs everywhere saying you will be shot. They actually arrest you and just kick you out, but obviously we didn't take much notice of that and took some photographs. But the reality is, you may say, well, there's nothing wrong with that, it's green, but is it? Because palm oil plantation is a crop. It is planted, it grows, it is harvested, the ground is now needs to recover. So it does not do what the rainforest, the trees do. It does not supply the oxygen that this planet needs. This is, as you can see, a sad photograph. This is primary rainforest on the left. On this side, that side is what they call slash and burn policy. That has all been cut down for palm oil plantation. So, we look at some of the species. There are 600 species of rattan. This is rattan. If you put your hand on one of those spikes, boy, will you know about it. Strangling figs, 300 species. Strangling figs grow at the bottom of a tree. They climb up the tree and kill the core tree. And you're left with some really nice sculptural fig trees, but the host tree is long dead. It is a beautiful place because we have this. This is a species called Vanda Hermocreana, an orchid, probably about this big, tiny little orchid growing in the forest, named after Hooker. From the minute, this is a begonia growing on the forest floor, tiny 1 or 2 millimetre flowers, to the huge. This is the Rafflesia. If anyone's ever had the pleasure of smelling the Rafflesia plant, it's not the nicest. It smells like rotten meat because it's pollinated by flies. So flies land in it thinking it's rotten meat, in they go, but this is actually a fungi. It's not really a flower, it's a fungi. And it's very rare to flower, and that flower is about 1 metre across. It's a big old flower. But if you do get close to it, bear in mind it does smell. And that's named after Thomas Stamford Raffles, the founder of Singapore. Birds of paradise, the flower, you can buy these in florists, they cost you about 10 quid a piece, the flower alone, but they grow wild in rainforests. My favourite are the deadly, which are these, the Nepenthes, pitcher plants. You can grow these in England, you can buy them in garden centres. I love pitcher plants. These are about 1 foot long, and basically at the bottom they have this horrible digestive juice where the insect falls in and that nourishes the plant. So there's a wide variety. So let's find Wilson's bird of paradise. We started in Sarong and we went to the island of Waigeo, where we know Wallace went. Now we made our journey in. You have to have a guide. You cannot go alone. Yeah, they are very protective of their animals, and quite rightly so. So the guide leads and we follow, being very quiet. Until we arrive at the spot. Now, Wilson's bird of paradise is one of these birds that displays on the ground. It dances to impress the female on the ground, not in a tree. And it's also one of these birds that it appears, and it has a wonderful, there's a little bit of video, it has a wonderful thing it does. It cleans its area first. It's a great husband. It does the housework. Yeah. It cleans all of the area first, so you drop a few leaves and the heat comes in and moves them. And we said to one guy who was with us, he was a photographer, we said, now make sure you've turned the click off your camera, make sure you've turned the flash off your camera, do not make a noise with your tripod. And he says, yeah, all done. And we sat and we waited, and then the bird landed, and this guy went flashes everywhere, and the bird flew away. He was very popular for the rest of the trip. Oh, I'm sorry, too late. So we didn't see it that time, but we did see it later. But this, if you look at the Birds of Paradise drawings, all Birds of Paradise drawings that were done at this time were done by a guy called John Gould. Now, John Gould hadn't seen a live bird of paradise. He was a bird illustrator. Seen many species of bird, but not birds of paradise live. So, all the pictures he drew are from dead specimens, which is not bad, considering that looks pretty much like that, which is the live specimen. So, this is the Canal Lab of Ornithology, which gave me kind permission to use this. So what it's doing, it's arrived, this is the male. You'll see he's cleaning, he's not having it, he's not having a mess. He's cleaning it all up. By now the females have arrived and are all perched on above him, about 6 of them. And when he's finished, he asks them to be impressed. And then he does his little dance. And on this occasion, I do know the birds flew away. They weren't impressed. So, the following year, we did actually get to see the Wilson's Bird of Paradise properly. But that year we didn't. But you can see that is a beautiful little bird. So that was one chick. From there, we wanted to see the red bird of paradise, Paradisia rubii, the red paradise bird. And that's that one. Beautiful thing. Now, again, they don't make it easier for you because they actually live in the top of the trees. And again, they've got it such that they only perform in the early morning light. So we went up, we walked for ages and ages and got up there and sat there and waited. And I think that's the girl's painting of the red bird of paradise. And if you look at these long, wiry tail feathers, and you'll see one in a moment on Angela's photograph, they are beautiful. And you can see why people in the 1920s, particularly women, wanted these for their hats. It was a fashion trend. And these were more or less nearly hunted to extinction, so they made a recovery. That's one of Angela's photographs. And if you look at the feather, it is that colour. I don't use Photoshop, mainly because I don't know how. But we don't use Photoshop. So that is one of Angela's photographs. And there's the other one of her. And there are 2 birds there, actually, the other one's behind it. But there you can see the male. I'm going to show you a little bit of video. This is our video. This is the male. Female arrives. She's not as pretty as the male. But there's probably a dozen males to every female, all wanting to mate with her. Then this was a bit of film where, and we were with a guy, an ornithologist, who said that this had never been filmed, and this was Angela's camera. I have to say, this was probably from about 20 yards away with a handheld camera, so it's pretty good. And there's the male on the left. The female is interested, and this was what's never been filmed, that little dance. He's trying to impress her, he's trying to woo her. She is interested, or by now she'd have flown away. He's trying. When they do mate, and he does mate, it is quick, so you don't blink. So she's now sort of presenting herself to him. She's saying, well, like, you know, it's early in the morning, but hell, why not? And you'll know when he actually mates with her because you'll see his wings, they come around her in an embrace. So there we go. They come around her in an embrace. job done, game over. So, that was the red birds of paradise. And we actually saw quite a few of those, so that was pretty good. And there's a really good breeding population on the island where Wallace had been, and it was the same place. In the photograph painting earlier, you saw that a hook like that, which is in that painting, and this is a picture from the Malay archipelago, and this is Wallace describes his house at Bessia in Waigeo. Sea-Trek constructed it, reconstructed it, because obviously it had gone. To the measurements given in Wallace's book, and that's really what they came up with. Now, Wallace was a tall man, about 6'2". How he lived in that, I don't know, but he did. Now, they said to me, "Oh, you can climb inside, sir." No, I don't think so. So I sent Angela, and she went. But sadly, and it's a true story, the guy who actually looked after that in Waigeo died of COVID. One of the tribesmen, the elders of the tribe. It then deteriorated, it's gone, but I think Sea-Trek are rebuilding it to have it rebuilt. So, it's not all birds of paradise. This is the coconut crab, and they again appear, and this is an example of evolution, because on a lot of these islands there are lots of very similar species, but not the same. Coconut crabs are the one in question because they are different on different islands. That's a big beast, and I'll show you how big it is because there's Angela behind it. And one of the ladies who was with us, bless her, that morning she said, "Oh, can you not just bring a coconut crab to me? I can't be bothered to walk and see one." And we all thought it was hilarious. We just looked at it and said, "No, you want to see a coconut crab, you come with us." She didn't see a coconut crab that day. But we did take some video for her. Bear in mind that those claws can literally crush a coconut. We need a machete. They go. They're a big old species. They're now protected. They used to eat these, but now they're protected. Big beast. So we were happy we were seeing lots of wildlife, but we wanted to see the kingbird of paradise. The kingbird of paradise was the one that was on Wallace's desk on the painting. It's the smallest bird of paradise. It's also one of the prettiest. So hopefully, I love it. It's called Cinereus Regis Red King, or Red Kingbird. So this was on the island of Salawati, and again, these are not my photographs, our photographs, because we saw it fleeting in a tree, but it had gone. These are taken by a guy called Tim Lannon, very good photographer. So there's the kingbird, there's the drawing of the kingbird. You see very, very similar, very, very excellent drawings. And again, they live in this sort of habitat, so it's difficult to see. So you do have to be very lucky. There it is, a photograph of it displaying. And there it is, and it's got wonderful blue legs. Fantastic blue legs. A little bit of video. I love these little tail feathers at the bottom, hanging down. It's about the same size as our wren. It's a very small bird. But also, like our wren, it's a very loud bird. You can hear it in the distance. He's very proud of himself. So, we didn't see the kingbird, to be fair. I haven't seen it yet. I hope I will one day. But we know they're there because we could hear them. We knew they were, but they are so small. It's like a tree like this, and you're looking for a sparrow. You know it's there, but you're not going to see it. But we wanted to see the last bird. Well, before the Wallace's, we wanted to see this is the lesser bird of paradise. Now it's a shame that this bird is called the lesser bird of paradise because it's no lesser than any other bird. But there is a greater bird of paradise, which is much the same but bigger. So hence this one is relegated to lesser bird of paradise, which is a shame, but it's a beautiful bird. And these white feathers are were extremely sought after by the natives because using their tribal dances. Thankfully now, the indigenous people have realised they can make more money out of keeping these animals alive than killing them. So it's a good thing really. They look after, they are the custodians. These appear on an island called Tomalol at the bottom. And again, the problem is with looking for animals in the wild is the weather. Now, this is the night before we were due to go and look for these birds, and you can see the clouds. We knew what was coming. We were due to leave the ship at 3 a.m. in the morning, but the weather was appalling. In fact, it was such a rough night, most people locked themselves in their cabin with a couple of cans and drank the night away, shall we say, or sat in the bar and drank themselves silly. But this you can see, and just after that, the heavens opened. Next morning, beautiful weather. But what had happened, we had to shelter, we had to come off course and shelter on an island that we hadn't got permission to land on. Now, you may say, well, it's just an island, surely you can park your boat anywhere. No. These islands are owned by the indigenous people. You have to have permission. So we anchored. Next thing you know, there's probably, I can imagine Captain Cook see 20 or 30 canoes coming out at you, all these natives shouting at you. And more or less happened to us, because we sort of anchored there, and within minutes there were 10 ship boats paddling towards us. Of course, these days they're all wearing Argentinian football shirts, or shirts with Rooney on the back or whatever. All they were interested in, who are you, what do you want, and how much are you going to pay us? You don't pay them in money, there's no point. So you pay them in cigarettes, or you pay them in fish, or you pay them in whatever they need. But money is no point, there's no point for money. But that was a nice little island which they did allow us then to explore. So they asked us why we were there, and we said we want to see the lesser bird of paradise. Yeah, we've got them. This one guy said, yeah, come with us, we'll show it. But it was quite late in the day, and we were not hopeful. But nevertheless, they took us, and we all got in a little boat, and we went up the stream. But the night had been terrible, and a lot of the trees had come down, so the river was blocked. So we thought, turn back, not a problem, we can do something else. No, one of the guys then, from under a blanket on his little canoe, took a chainsaw out, a petrol chainsaw, started it, he got a cigarette in his mouth, started it, jumped into the water, waded up to here in water, and started cutting the trees with a chainsaw. And bless him, he did a great job. I have to say, we did get up the river, and we did manage to get, that's the drawing of the girl's drawing, we did manage to get one photo. But that was it. It was quite late in the day, but we were happy, and they were happy, so it was a job well done. On that island, another island just next to it, is the island of Missoul. Now, Missoul used to be a volcano, and it's a dead volcano now. And this is obviously the Corda, and the crater is now filled with water. It's a strange lake, you can swim in it. This deep is fresh water, and below it is salt water, and the two don't mix. So one is clear and one is muddy and dirty. But you can swim in it. So it was a hot day, so we got in. And then they said to us, oh, there are jellyfish. You'll be fine, they'll be fine. They're nice jellyfish, don't worry. I've never really heard of a nice jellyfish, but apparently they do exist. And we're in the water, swimming around this lake, and it's quite deep, to be perfectly honest, and very cold. And we see a few jellyfish. This is a pink jellyfish. And again, here's an example of evolution. Because a lot of these craters exist on various islands. And a lot of them have their own species. They're all different. They're all jellyfish, but they're slightly different. And these are stingless jellyfish. Because there is very little food for them to eat in this lake, fish-wise. So they have evolved to exist on algae. So they can consume algae and survive. And we managed to get, I say we, I mean Angela. It's about as big as a dinner plate. And it is, I have to say, when you touch one, it is actually quite weird. But they are just like jelly to touch. But there's hundreds of these, thousands, if not thousands, Strange thing to want to do, but we like doing things like this. So, jellyfish, we've seen it all. Wallace's golden burning butterfly. We then travelled up to Bacan Island, and this to me was the highlight of my trip. Before we arrived, we managed to swim with these guys, whale sharks. A bit of video of a whale shark. 15 metres long, the most docile animal on the planet. A 5-foot mouth with a throat as big as yours. So he can't swallow you, don't worry. If it does swallow you, that's got Chinese still. Don't worry. Also, you get sea turtles as we landed, went snorkeling with sea turtles. This is a bit of video which I have to put in. Angela was videoing this, and this has got a really great defence mechanism. So he wasn't bothered. These things can swim at 20 miles an hour, so it's going to outswim you. And then these, the giant manta rays, about 7 or 8 metres across wingspan, totally harmless. They are the gentle giants of the sea. Beautiful creatures. This is not a stingray, this is a manta ray. Stingrays will kill you, because it's like Steve Irwin died. These are manta rays, they have no sting. Beautiful creatures. So we arrived on Bacan Island, and we knew we had to walk to get to see if this butterfly was there. We looked at the spot where Wallace had collected them, and we thought, okay, let's do it. That's what we were looking for. There's Wallace himself with the male and the underside and the top side. And believe it or not, that is the correct way to hold the butterfly. Yeah, you never pick it up by its wings because the scales would kill it, but you hold it like that. Now, if you look very closely, and you'll see it better in a moment, that is not my finger, because the fingernails are dirty. They are one of the guides. Because you're not allowed to touch them. Indigenous people, yes, but not people like us. And so these are just some of the stock photographs that exist of the golden birdwing. So, in Wallace's book, he wrote this. When I took it out of my net and opened its gorgeous wings, I was nearer fainting with delight and excitement than I have ever been in my life. My heart beat violently and the blood rushed to my head, leaving a headache for the rest of the day. The insect surpassed my expectations. That's a hell of a description of an animal. And so I thought, I've got to see this, see if it does that to me. Because I've waited since I was 10 years old to see this bird. So we decided, we knew where it was, guide went in front, and I suddenly realised that this is an airport. And we're walking across the runway. And I called him back and I said, airport, runway. Don't worry, 2 aeroplanes, 1 in, 1 out. You've missed them both. You haven't got to worry. So we walked across, and it is in fact secondary rainforest. And this is a photograph on the way that Angela took. And this goes to show that you do not need top-notch photography equipment. That is taken on a mobile phone. So you don't need, in years gone by, yes, I would have taken cameras and lenses, but now these days I take my phone and that's all I need. So that's what we call a crimson darter. Arrived in the area where we knew the butterfly was, and this is secondary forest, which means it has been cut down and replanted at some stage. So we weren't hopeful, to be honest. We thought, well, maybe we will see it, maybe we won't. But we went along, and then we soon came across this, which is the chrysalis of the golden birdwing butterfly. It's probably a good 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches long. That's the chrysalis. So we knew we were onto something. We then came across that. That is the caterpillar of the golden birdwing butterfly. And that's probably, you'll see in a moment, that's probably about 4 or 5 inches long. And it looks evil with these red spikes, but again, this is adaptation. Those spikes are soft. It doesn't sting you, it just looks like it could sting you. So if you're an animal, you don't eat it. Clever. So, not my fingernail. On its front of its head, it has these 2 giant airbags. It can inflate at will to scare predators off. So that's the caterpillar. And again, you'll notice we're not touching it, we're just photographing it. And then we came across the actual adult. And this has got about maybe 4.5, 5 inch wingspan, and it's an adult. And we were chatting to one of the guys who was with us, and he said what they had started to do was a breeding project in the area. And they had caged in probably about an acre of land with netting. And what they did is that they bred the butterflies, they then allowed them to be released into the forest, collected the cocoons and put them in for protection. So there was a very good population of the golden birdwing in that area, which is a great thing, really. And that, I have to say, did it give me a headache all day? Probably not, but it did excite me a lot, I have to say. I even wrote an article on it, so it's a beautiful creature. And there's the guy picking it up to show you how to do it. Not my fingernail, I will state again. So from there, I'd only got one thing I really wanted to see: Wallace's standard wing. Sounds a little bit boring, to be honest, a standard winged bird of paradise, but it's not called standard because it's just pretty normal. It's called a standard because of its wings, the feathers, its wing feathers, and you'll see that. And there he is, not the prettiest bird of paradise, but I love him. I think he's gorgeous, and I went to the ends of the earth to see this fella, and we did manage to get some good shots of him. So that is in a place called Wida. Wida is a resort, it's an eco-resort, you can go there. Difficult to get to, but you can go there. And you get quite a few backpackers go there, or GAP students go there and just basically get drunk. But it is a wonderful island to visit. And there it is, that's the Wallace's standard wing. Now if you look at the drawing by Gall, this is actually green, but this one looks blue. Why? Well, the reason is that those feathers are iridescent, and as it moves in the light, like oil on a water, it changes colour. So as it moves in the light, one moment they're green, one moment they're blue. That must have been hell to paint, because as he looked at it that way it was green, and he turned that way it was probably blue. So in the light they do change colour. And if you look at there, you can see here the standard, the wings, these long white feathers hanging out. Difficult to photograph from a distance, and again, it's just half light and it does become very difficult. So you take what shots you can get and you're happy with them. But then, I forgive the quality, this was taken through a bird spotter with a mobile phone. It does come in and out, but you can see it. We slowed it down, you can see standard feathers out. It then flies off. And Angela's trying desperately to keep it in focus. But it does, and then as it flies back, you will see its feathers in word glory. Standard feathers. So we did manage to see it. Not the prettiest of birds, I admit, but this is Cornell's video of it. You'll see it much clearer. There he is. You see the feathers come out? Brilliant. And when Wallace, well, to be fair, I say Wallace, when Ali discovered this, it was Ali actually bought the first specimen to Wallace, not Wallace, it was Ali himself. His young guide bought this, and there's a wonderful book called What a Wonderful Bird, Sir, I think it's called. It's written from the perspective of Ali, his assistant. You should really read that book. But there he is, as I say, most people wouldn't consider a bird of paradise. I think he's the prettiest bird there is, but there you go. This is the problem with travelling in Indonesia. You are on the ring of fire, and around that area there's probably 150 active volcanoes. You know, the ring of fire goes right around the earth and then picks up back through Hawaii. And this is Ternate. Now, Ternate is a live volcano. It is an active volcano, and there's smoke pouring out of it most days, to be fair. As I said, the one on Flores has just erupted. Recently, a few years back, one on Bali erupted, causing all sorts of problems. And people live on these slopes, so you know they get used to it. But there has been, I don't know why at the moment, but there has been a lot of volcanic activity in the last few months, whether it's the heat or various changes to the earth, but there has been a lot of volcanoes. There's the ship, in the background, the volcano of Ternate. One of the things why I like working with Sea Trek is because of this. This is an ornithologist called Case, he's a Dutch guy, and what we tend to do as well, we take out reading glasses, because there are no opticians, medicine, aspirin, paracetamol, there are no doctors, reading books, writing books, colouring pencils, all sorts. And then we distribute them to the local people. And this lady, bless her, 94 years of age, suffering from very severe cataracts, not a chance in hell of getting them sorted. We gave her some glasses. She loved them so much she didn't even take the label off. And then she actually stood up and did a great little dance for us as a thank you. But I find it fantastic. If you look at her teeth, her aren't teeth, but they are quite red. The gums are stained because they chew something called betel nut. And if you've ever tried betel nut, it's a bit like a peanut with no salt, and it's a really horrible taste. But they chew this because it is a drug, but they think it's a mild aphrodisiac. She's 94, and she's chewing betel nut, and I thought, well, fair play, and I have tried it, and I must say it's not for me. It's not for me. As is indeed their rice wine, that's also not for me.
Is the chair there, is that a car tyre?
Yeah, well, a lot of it, actually, I'm glad you know it, yeah, it does look like it. You have to bear in mind these guys, you know, they're fishermen, they recycle, their water is delivered from the mainland in huge vats. You know, they have no education. I mean, it's no good offering them money, they just want cigarettes, most of them, you know, so. In fact, they live on cigarettes. But yeah, you are quite right. But then, once we've done all of what we wanted to see, coral. Coral is in a mess. If you know anything about coral, you know anything about the seas, David Attenborough has changed tack. Now, he's now about the seas. The programme was just on called Ocean. Well, you know, and that's the problem, is the seas are rising in temperature. Climate change, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is, we've always had climate change. It's just that we, as a race, as a species, we're not really helping climate change. We're accelerating it. But we've always had climate change. But the problem is with coral, it exists, and it's an animal, not a plant. It exists at a very, very thin temperature range. And if the sea rises by 2 or 3 degrees, it will die. Once it dies like that, that's it, bleach coral. So one of the things we do with Sea Trek, we work with them. They take cuttings of coral, live coral. They then tie it to metal cages on the seabed and grow it. This is Nita, one of our friends who actually works as a volunteer. They're all volunteers. And they tie it, and then the coral regrows, and then they move the entire cage into an area with which has got sustainable coral. Because the sea temperatures do vary. One day there'll be one temperature, next day they'll be down. So, but the sea temperatures do vary. So that's one of the reasons I really admire what they do, because all volunteers out there replanting coral. Finally, we arrived at Ternate. Now, Ternate is important because it is from Ternate that Alfred Russel Wallace wrote his letter to Darwin, or we think it was. His famous letter to Darwin, which then was the catalyst for Darwin to go, oh no. Because if you know anything about the story, Darwin looked at the letter and he actually said to his 2 friends, Lyle and Hooker, this man has basically covered my entire theory by his headings of his chapters. Literally, in 6 pages, he had covered most of Darwin's theory. And Darwin asked his 2 friends, what should he do? Should he publish and be accused of plagiarism, or should he not publish and waste 20 years of his life? Thankfully he did publish, but the 2 men really, Darwin always held, and now we know why Darwin was so enamoured of Wallace in the Origin of Species. So, was Wallace bothered by it all? Not really, I don't think he was. He was a very humble character. He was excited that somebody as auspicious as Darwin would actually correspond with him. He never considered himself to be a great man. He was always a humble guy. So we arrive in Ternate, which is a special place. Now in England, it's events like this that put Wallace on the map. Hence why I was glad to come here and do this. Ask a 10-year-old or a senior school child about Wallace and Gromit? And you go, oh yeah, the Wallace, oh you mean William Wallace? No. Most of them, I did a survey, I did a lecture, 100 students, and I asked them who was Wallace. About 60% said Wallace and Gromit. I ignored that data. Some of them said William Wallace. 7 out of 100 said Alfred Russel Wallace, which was positive. And one guy said to me, he's the bloke on the back of a £10 note, which of course was Darwin. But I didn't even respond to that, to be honest. But in Indonesia, this is graffiti. This is not artwork. This is actually somebody who's graffiti. We don't know who did it. It's graffiti. And there's Ali, his Malay servant. A letter from Ternate, and this is now, and then you actually go to this and you can stand there and have your photograph taken by it. But that's actually graffiti. So did we succeed in the aims of the expedition? Well, we did follow in the footsteps of the naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace. We visited the sites first discovered, described in his book. We did ascertain if the species he discovered are still there, and in the main they are, in perhaps not so big numbers, but they are. We weren't killing them, obviously, we were photographing them, but there are decent populations of these creatures. We did visit the remote Bacan Islands and found the population of the golden bird. We did look for Wallace's bee, but Wallace's bee is one of the biggest bees on earth, but the weather was against us and time, and the northern part of the island where it lives had some very bad weather, so we didn't see Wallace's bee. We then continued to work at sea to sailing adventures in the coral conservation, and we continue to do that. We're out there in a fortnight's time, and we'll be doing much the same. So finally, so hopefully next year, I was going to this year, but I'm doing something else. Hopefully next year we want to set sail for Papua New Guinea. You're more than welcome to join us, and we'll look for the other 38 species of paradise. Thank you very much, guys. Any questions at all? Yes, sir.
Yes, earlier on you said birds could quite easily fly the distance across
Yes.
the open ocean. Birds like to extend their territory, don't they, when they're
They do.
moving? Why is it that birds never cross the line?
One of the reasons, as I said earlier, was the fact that if the animal has got everything it needs, it stays put. But another reason is that strait between Lombok, the Lombok Strait and Bali, it may not look much to us or even a bird, but that is some of the roughest seas on earth. We were caught a few years back now in a force 9 gale on Christmas Day, if Andrew remembers, on that strait. And I honestly thought my time was up because the ship was rolling like it was being tossed and turned, and the weather was appalling. So the idea is that the birds are not going to fly across because they probably don't know that the land's there, so they don't know how far they've got to fly. But the main rule that Wallace put forward is the fact is that if a species has everything it needs to exist, mate, habitat, food, then it will stay put and it will evolve in that area. But that's probably the reason. Any other questions, guys?
So just extending that, why logs floated across with spiders on or
Well, that's to me, and I'm going to be honest here, that to me I find a difficult hypothesis to accept, right, is when they say a reptile floated across on a log. You know, and that's what a lot of naturalists talk about this. Now these animals arrived on this island by floating on a flotilla of logs, insects and spiders and reptiles. That's an awful lot of reptiles that have got to float across the island, across the sea. So the jury's still out on that one for me. I'm still working on it, but I can answer why spiders and insects get across, because spiders, particularly certain species, can balloon. What we call balloon. So even our native spiders will, when they're very small, will climb to the top of a plant, they will let out silk. Yeah, you've all seen it, and it will go like a kite, and the moment this silk becomes in the wind, they're gone. This is why when you hang your washing out on the line, you've got loads of spiders on it. And these spiders can balloon halfway around the globe. And insects are much the same, they'll be carried on the wing. We know monarch butterflies, for instance, and certain species of butterfly migrate from Africa. What's really brilliant is that they migrate to Africa, to Europe, and by the time they've arrived in Europe, they're third generation. The butterfly that started in Africa is not the butterfly that lands in Europe. It's third generation, you know. So it's wind dispersal and that type of thing. But animals floating across on flotillas, I need to be convinced of that, really. Okay, guys, any more? Yes.
My West Papuan indigenous friends tell me there is such a thing as a laughing dog. Dog, I'm not quite sure we would say it was a dog, but
Singing dog.
is it so not laugh? Yes, singing dog.
A singing dog.
Have you seen
in
one?
Papua. It's cool. I haven't seen one, to be fair, but there are lots of animals out there. For instance, you see a lot of animals which look like dogs.
Yes, that's why I said.
You know, particularly like dogs, like you've got a lot of the fossorials who look like dogs, but they're not dogs. Some of them are marsupials as it gets further across. You know, so you do see them, and they do make a hell of a noise like hyenas. I haven't seen one, but then again, I've been looking for a species of animal called the orang pedak now for 20 years, which is the wild man of Borneo. And I haven't seen him either. Orang pedak. There are some strange creatures on this planet. I have one lecture where it's camouflage, and some of the creatures I show you, you just would not believe they exist on this planet. So, but next time I'm out there, I'm going to look. I'm going to ask.
Thank you.
Yes.
Whilst filming the coral,
Mhm.
do you get things like parrotfish?
Yeah, parrotfish. Hundreds of species. I'm not a fish expert, so I leave that to the guys who live out there. They can say, yeah, parrotfish. They know. Me, it's a fish. But the one fish I do know is the triggerfish, the Titan triggerfish. That is one fish you do not go near. That thing is evil. You know, that will attack you, and it will bite through a wetsuit. You know, they're so big, and you're floating and you see a Titan trigger, and we have to say to the teenagers who are with us, do not go near the Titan triggerfish, and you'll still get one of them try and chase it until it turns around and chases them. But yeah, you get a lot of parrotfish, you get a lot of...
Because they eat the coral, don't they?
Yeah, you get a lot. Parrotfish do eat the coral. They also get quite a lot of the spiny, which they've got a bit of a glut of it in Florida at the moment. You know, these spiny sea anemones, which eat coral. But when they see them, they do remove them. They actually destroy them because they are an invasive species and breed like hell. But yeah, parrotfish tend not so much eat coral as sort of sharpen their teeth on it. So they tend to scrape it a bit like a canary or a budgerigar would use cuttlefish. But yeah, you do see them. And conger eels, they're quite common out there, about 7-foot conger eels. But again, you don't have to worry, you know, they're there. You ignore them, they ignore you. Okay guys, anyone else? Well, fantastic, I hope you enjoyed that. Yes. Oh, what I wanted to just say, I wanted to just thank David and Stella. And I you think you haven't done anything, but you probably have. So I know you have. I also want to note that I know it was your anniversary yesterday. Your 64th, I believe. Yeah, well done. I mean, we've done 42 years, and if I ever do 64, I don't know what I'll probably be, well, I'll be grey-headed. I am. Thank you for inviting me down, David and Stella, because it's an
pleasure.
I would not miss this for the world, because you guys always make me so welcome. So hopefully I'll come back next year and we'll do it all again.
Ray, I'd like to say on behalf of the room here to say thank you so much, and to you, Angela, for coming down all the way from Eastbourne and sharing your knowledge with us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much
My
indeed.
pleasure indeed.
A big round of applause.